Nkechi, Chief Ken whispered, his voice heavy with disbelief. Nkechi stood up slowly, her entire body tense. Ken, she murmured, barely able to speak his name. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with years of pain and unanswered questions. Chief Ken's eyes flickered to Ugonma, and he opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Piecing things together, but he couldn't accept what was becoming painfully clear. Nkechi, who is this girl? Chief Ken finally spoke, his voice trembling. Nkechi's chest tightened as she fought to keep her composure. She looked at Ugonma, then back at Ken. Every part of her wanted to scream, to tell him everything, to unload the burden he had carried for years. She took a deep breath, her voice barely more than a whisper. Ken, Ugonma is your daughter. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Chief Ken's face went pale, his mind struggling to grasp what Nkechi had just said. His eyes widened in shock as he looked back at Ugonma. His heart pounded in his chest as the truth crashed into him fully. This girl, this stranger he felt such a deep connection to, was his child. His child. No, that cannot be true, he stammered, shaking his head as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. I don't understand. Nkechi's eyes filled with tears, but she stood firm. It's true, Ken. I never told you. I didn't have the chance to. You left before I could. Ugonma, she is our daughter. Chief Ken staggered back, his word spinning out of control. The years of lies, the time lost, the fact he had never knew. He could hardly breathe. Nkechi's voice trembled with anger and pain as she stared at Ken, her eyes blazing hot. You went to the States, Ken. You promised me you would come back, that you would be together, that we are going to be together. But the moment you were gone, you forgot about me. You married someone else and left me alone here to suffer. Her words were sharp, filled with years of pent-up hurt and betrayal. Ken stood there, stunned, his heart ached, seeing the pain in Nkechi's eyes. But her words didn't make sense to him. Nkechi, that's not true, he said quietly, shaking his head. I never married anyone when I went to the States for my study. I didn't. Nkechi froze. What? You didn't marry? She looked at him confused, her anger faltering. No, Ken continued, his voice strained with emotion. After my studies, I came back searching for you. I wanted to be with you, Nkechi, more than anything. You were the love of my life. But when I asked about you, my mother told me that you have moved on, that you had married another man. Nkechi's breath caught in her throat. Your mother said what? Her voice was barely a whisper, her mind racing to process what Ken had just said. Yes, Ken said, his voice shaking with disbelief. She told me you had left me, that you had moved on with someone else, even without telling me. Nkechi's heart sank. She felt the blood drain from her face as the realization hit her like a punch to her chest. All these years, all the pain, the loneliness, it was all a lie. Ken hadn't abandoned her. Her mother had deceived them both. For a moment, they stood in stunned silence, the weight of the truth crashing down around them. That is not true, Nkechi whispered, her voice breaking. I never married anyone. I waited for you, Ken. I waited, but you never came back. And when I went to ask your mother, she told me you had married someone else. She told me to stay away from you. Ken's face went pale, and fury began to build inside him. My mother, she did this? His voice was low, almost shaking with rage. He could hardly believe it, but the pieces were starting to fit together. His mother had lied. She had torn them apart, kept them away from each other all these years. Ken clenched his fist, his anger boiling over. She lied to both of us, he muttered, pacing around the hospital room. She destroyed everything. All this while they were saying this, Ugonma was peacefully sleeping on the hospital bed without hearing anything that they have said. Nkechi shook her head, tears streaming down her face. All these years, Ken, I was alone, raising our daughter all by myself. And you didn't even know we had a child? I even told your mom that I was pregnant with our baby, and she said I should take it out. She told me to abort it, that the child doesn't belong to you, and she chased me away. And she didn't mention any of this to you? Ken turned to her, his heart breaking at the sight of her pain. I am sorry, Nkechi, my love, he whispered. I had no idea. I didn't even know about Ugonma, about any of this. If I had known, I never would have left you. Nkechi wiped her tears, the truth leaving her shaking. But there was no time to dwell on it. There was something even more pressing. Ken, what else has your mother lied about? What secret is she keeping away from you? Ken's jaw tightened. I am going to find out now, he said, his voice hard. He turned and stormed out of the hospital, the fury driving him forward. He had to confront his mother. He needed answers. The lies had gone on for too long. As Ken drove home, his mind was a storm of emotions. The betrayal cut deep. His mother had manipulated them, kept them from the love of his life and his own child. But why? When Ken arrived home, he burst through the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. His mother, seated calmly in the living room, looked up at him with mild surprise. Ken, what is this? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Why are you barging into my house like that? Ken stood before her, breathing heavily, his face twisted with anger. You lied to me, he said, his voice shaking with fury. You told me Nkechi had married someone else. You told her I was married. Why, mother? Why did you not tell me that she was pregnant and you sent her away? Why would you do that to me? His mother's face hardened, but she said nothing. Ken took a deep step closer, his fist clenched. Tell me the truth right now. Why did you tear us apart, mother? There was a moment of silence, and then his mother sighed. I did it for your own good, she said coldly. That girl was beneath you, Ken. She had nothing to offer to you. I wasn't going to let you throw away your life on someone like that. She was poor and wretched. Ken's eyes widened in shock. So you destroyed my life. You made me believe the woman I love had abandoned me. How could you have done that to me, mother? His voice cracked with emotion, his anger mixed with deep hurt. His mother, expressionless. It was for your future, Ken. You were destined for more than such a village girl could have given you. She was poor and wretched. Ken's rage boiled over. You had no right to interfere in my life like that, mother. to take away my family from me. You have no right. Then, in the heat of the moment, Ken's mother's expression shifted, as if she was holding back something even more dangerous. Ken sensed it immediately. What else are you hiding from me, mother? What else are you hiding? Say something! He shouted as he stepped closer. His mother hesitated, her eyes darting away from his. Ken, please, let's not dive into this. No! Ken shouted. Tell me everything right now! There was a long pause, and then, with a sigh, his mother's cold facade began to crack. Fine. You want the truth? Then you will know the whole truth, she said bitterly. Adaeze, she is not your real daughter. Ken's words seemed to stop. The room felt like it was spinning. He staggered backwards. His face grew pale. What? What are you saying? What are you saying, mother? His mother's gaze was steady now, her tone emotionless. Adaeze is not your biological daughter, Ken. I arranged for her mother to marry you when she was already pregnant by another man. I needed her. I needed their power. I needed her family name for you. I did all these things for you. Ken felt the ground had been ripped from under his feet. His heart pounded in his ears. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. Adaeze, his beloved daughter, the girl he had raised and loved all these years, wasn't his? You lied to me all these years? You and my wife, you lied to me. You made me raise a child that wasn't mine, and you never told me. His mother remained calm, her face devoid of any regret. It was for the best, Ken. It was for the best. Ken couldn't take it anymore. The betrayal, the lies, the years of deception. It was all too much. He stormed out of the house, his heart shattered into pieces. Everything he thought he knew, everything he had built his life on, was a lie. As he drove away, his mind raced. Ugonma was his daughter, Adaeze wasn't. His entire world had been turned upside down, and now he had no idea how to fix it. Ken drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, his hands gripping the steering so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and heartbreak. He pulled over to the side of the road, his chest heavy with emotion. He buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by the weight of all that has just happened. As tears rolled down his eyes, suddenly his phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a call from the hospital. With trembling hands, he answered. Chief Ken. It was the doctor's voice, calm but urgent. Your daughter, Ugonma, has woken up. She's asking for you. Ken's heart skipped a beat. Ugonma was awake. His real daughter. Without wasting any second, he started the car and drove straight to the hospital. His mind was racing, thinking of what to say to her, how to make up for lost time, how to explain everything to her. When he arrived at the hospital, he rushed through the corridors until he reached the room where Ugonma lay. Nkechi was sitting by her side, holding her hands, her face filled with relief and worry. When she saw Ken enter, her eyes met his. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. Ken, Nkechi whispered, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. She has been asking for you. Ken's heart pounded as he approached Ugonma's bed. She looked at him with wide, curious eyes. She was weak, but there was a spark of recognition in her gaze. Hello, Ugonma, Ken said gently, his voice trembling. I am here now. "You are the man who saved me," she said, her voice soft but clear. Ken's heart swelled with emotion. He knelt beside her bed, taking her small hands into his. "Yes, I am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But Ugonma, there is something I need to tell you, something very important." Ugonma's eyes searched his face, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Nkechi looked at Ken, her expression filled with both anxiety. Ken took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Ugonma," he began, "there is something you don't know. Something I didn't know until recently. I am your father, your real father." The room went silent. Ugonma stared at him, her young mind struggling to process the information. She looked at her mother, seeking confirmation, and Nkechi nodded her head. "It's true, my child," Nkechi said softly. "Chief Ken, he is your father." Ugonma's eyes well up with tears. But I thought all this time." She looked back at Ken, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you come for me, Papa? Why didn't you find me?" Ken's heart broke at her words. He had no answer that could take away the pain she felt. "I didn't know," he whispered, his voice filled with regret. "I didn't know about you, Ugonma. If I had known, I would have been here all the days of my life. I am so sorry, my child. I am so sorry. Please forgive me." Tears streamed down Ugonma's cheeks as she looked at him, and then, in a moment of pure emotion, she reached out and hugged him tightly. Ken wrapped his arm around her, holding her as if he was afraid to let go. Tears filled his own eyes as the weight of the years they had lost washed over him. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still as father and daughter held each other. The bond they shared stronger than any lie that had kept them apart all these years. As the moment passed, Ugonma pulled back and looked at Chief Ken, her eyes wet with tears. "Will you come home with us, Papa? Will you come home?" she asked softly, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Ken's heart ached at her words. He had missed so much of her life. But now that he knew the truth, he was determined to be there for her. "Yes, Ugonma," he said, his voice steady. "I will come home with you, and we will figure things out together. You and your mother are my family now, and I will never let you go again. Never." Later that evening, as Ken drove Nkechi and Ugonma back to their mother's home, his mind was heavy with thoughts of Adaeze. How would he break the news to her? How would she handle knowing that he had another daughter, and she is not his real daughter? Ken pulled into Nkechi's small compound, the car's headlights cutting through the darkness. The house was simple but full of warmth, and as they stepped inside, Ken was struck by how much of Ugonma's life he had missed. There were pictures on the walls of Ugonma at different stages of her life, smiling, playing, growing up without him. "I will make up something for us to eat," Nkechi said quietly, breaking the silence as she moved towards the small kitchen, trying to keep things normal in the midst of the emotional whirlwind they were all experiencing. The next morning, Ken returned to his home, his heart heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Chief Ken got home and confronted his wife about the paternity of Adaeze, their daughter. She denied it at first, but when Ken told her that his mother already confessed to him, she broke down and started crying. In the heat of the moment, they didn't notice Adaeze entered the room. She was so shocked at what she had heard that she ran into her room and started crying. Meanwhile, Chief Ken told his wife that he wants a divorce immediately and he told her that his lawyer would serve her some papers to sign. She only lay on the floor crying and pleading for mercy. Adaeze sat on her bed, her tears soaking her pillow as she thought about everything she had heard. The world she knew had come crashing down on her. How could this be real? How could the girl she had tormented for being poor, the girl she had looked down on, be the true heir to her father's empire? It felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Chief Ken had made it clear to everyone. Ugonma, the girl Adaeze had bullied for years, was his biological daughter. She was the heiress, and Adaeze, well, she was the adoptive child. Adaeze felt like a stranger in the home she had once considered her kingdom. It wasn't just the wealth and luxury that slipped from her grasp. It was her identity. Everything she thought she was, the privileged daughter of a powerful man, was all a lie. When Ugonma and her mother Nkechi walked into the mansion for the first time as part of Chief Ken's family, Adaeze had felt the walls crumbling and closing in around her. Ugonma's presence in the grand living room was like a cruel twist of fate. The girl she had insulted and humiliated now stood where Adaeze used to, and Ken introduced her as the rightful heir. The words, "Heiress of my empire," echoed in Adaeze's ears, burning into her soul like a fire. How did things flip so quickly, she asked herself. The news spread like wildfire throughout the town, and before long, everyone knew about the switch. Adaeze had gone from being the rich, envied girl to a figure of ridicule. The once tight circle of friends she had, the girls who had always laughed with her and admired her, now avoided her like a plague. When she walked into the school, the whispers followed her like a shadow. The same girls who had bullied Ugonma alongside her now turned their backs on her, leaving Adaeze isolated and humiliated. Students pointed at her, some even laughing openly as she walked down the hallway. Adaeze's face burning with shame. The memory of how she had mocked Ugonma for her torn shoes, her simple clothes, and her poverty now played in her mind on repeat. She had been so cruel, so heartless, and now she was the one being laughed at. Her friends no longer cared to be seen with her. She was no longer the daughter of a wealthy chief, but just Adaeze, the adopted child of Chief Ken. Look who is the poor girl now. They sneered at her as they laughed. Guess you aren't as special as you thought, huh? They all laughed at her. Adaeze cried herself to sleep every night, her pillow drenched with bitterness of regret and shame. She didn't know how to face Ugonma. What could she possibly say to the girl she had hurt so deeply? But Ugonma wasn't the person Adaeze had expected her to be. Even after all the bullying, Ugonma didn't retaliate. She didn't lash out or flaunt her new status. In fact, she kept to herself, walking quietly through the halls of the school, not responding to all the taunts or the questions about her sudden change in fortune. One day, Adaeze couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the shame, the guilt, and the loneliness crushed her, and she stayed home from school. She sat alone in her room, her heart heavy with everything she had lost. But what she hadn't lost was the love of the man who had raised her, Chief Ken. After the divorce between her mother and Chief Ken had promised to support her. She will live with him and he will take care of her. Even though the truth about her parentage had come out, but still, Adaeze couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong there anymore. Then, one afternoon, There was a soft knock on Adaeze's door. She wiped her tear-streaked face and called out, "Come in." The door creaked open, and to her surprise, it was Ugonma standing there, her face gentle but serious. Adaeze's heart pounded in her chest. What was Ugonma doing here? Was she here to gloat and mock her, or to rub all this on her face? Ugonma stepped inside the room, her voice soft but steady. "Can we talk?" Adaeze didn't know what to say. She just stared at Ugonma, her eyes swollen from crying, her throat tight. After a moment, she nodded her head. Ugonma sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped together on her lap. "I never wanted this to happen," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for any of this. I never wanted to take your place either." Adaeze blinked in surprise. She had expected anger, maybe even triumph, but Ugonma's voice was filled with sadness, not resentment. "I know you hate me," Ugonma continued, her eyes downcast. "And I understand why, but I never hated you, Adaeze. Even when you bullied me and almost killed me, I didn't hate you. I just didn't understand why you do all that." Adaeze felt a lump form in her throat. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I did not know the truth." "But you don't need to know who I am to respect me," Ugonma said. "Bullying is bad and can affect people's self-esteem. Because of you, I was hit by a car. I nearly lost my life because of your bullying," Ugonma said softly. "But now we both know the truth, and we have to find a way to live with it. I didn't want to fight you, Adaeze. I just want peace." Tears welled up in Adaeze's eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. After everything she had done to Ugonma, the girl was here asking for peace. "I'm so sorry, Ugonma," Adaeze sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry. I am sorry for everything I did to you. I was horrible to you. I didn't know. I did not even know you were my sister." Ugonma reached out and gently touched Adaeze's arms. "It's okay," she said softly. "We can't change the past, but maybe we can try to move forward." Adaeze and Ugonma slowly began to rebuild their relationship, starting from a place of understanding and forgiveness. It wasn't easy, but over time, they learned to lean on each other and, against all odds, became close, very close friends. Adaeze realized that despite everything that had happened, Ugonma didn't hold a grudge. Instead, she extended kindness, something Adaeze had never expected. At school, things gradually began to change too. Adaeze no longer walked with her head down, avoiding people's judgment stares. Instead, she carried herself with a quiet humility, no longer the entitled rich girl who looked down on others. Ugonma's presence by her side helped Adaeze navigate the difficult part of redemption. Slowly, people stopped whispering behind Adaeze's back, and soon she earned respect for the changes she had made in herself. Meanwhile, at home, things blossomed beautifully. Chief Ken, overwhelmed with happiness to have both his daughters under one roof, finally married Nkechi. Their wedding was simple but filled with love and joy. The house was no longer filled with tension or lies, but with laughter, understanding, and warmth. Adaeze and Ugonma stood side by side at the wedding, their hearts full of hope for the future. Most importantly, Adaeze learned one of life's greatest lessons: never judge or mistreat others, because life can change in the blink of an eye. She realized that bullying people for their circumstances was not only cruel but short-sighted. You never know what the future holds, and the tables can turn when you least expected it.